All right, hello and welcome back. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, and today we are continuing down our pathway of security engineer. This will be day 5 or episode 5 of the security engineer pathway. We are inside the threats and risks module, and we're going to be going through the governance and regulation room. And also, being that there's a prerequisite for this room, we're going to cover another room, which is the web application security. So you're going to get a 2-in-1, a twofer, as they say. And this is what the outline is going to look like. So we have the intro, why governance and regulation is important, information security frameworks, governance, risk and compliance, privacy and data protection, NIST special publications, InfoSec management and compliance. And as a part of our intro, we're going to go through the web application security, which has web application security risks and practical examples of web application security. So all of this stuff is going to be timestamped in the description below. So if you want to skip around or find any specific part of this, you can. As always, if you are studying for your security engineer or CYSA plus, security analyst, pen test plus, ethical hacker, any of those things, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out in any of those pathways. We actually just finished the SOC level 1 pathway, and there's a full playlist with an organized episode history, and we're going along security engineer right now, and then we got to finish up Pentest Plus as well. I think there's maybe a couple of more videos for Pentest Plus, but all of that stuff is on the channel, so it helps you directly with your certification exams as well as your day-to-day in any of those roles. And when I took my CYSA exam, a lot of this rooms and a lot of these this content and everything like that actually helped me. Believe it or not, it's very, very useful, and a lot of this stuff over here is significantly helpful. If you're not good, or if you don't prefer reading to learn, that's why I'm doing these videos, to kind of make it a little bit easier, because everything on TryHackMe is read and then there's labs involved. But I also like videos and audio and stuff like that, and visuals and things like that. So that's why I started this channel, for my sake and as well as your own sake. So hopefully you'll actually find value from it and you'll actually join our community. We would love to have you. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the intro of this room. So cybersecurity is obviously a very rapidly evolving landscape. Malicious actors or hackers, they just constantly want to find new vulnerabilities, because security analysts and security engineers are always patching vulnerabilities. So they need to find new ways in. And the intention typically is to find, to cause damage or disrupt business or steal data or steal money, like a lot of different things. So to combat this, we need to take a very comprehensive, holistic approach to InfoSec and regulation and everything like that. It requires that we establish robust policies, meaning sophisticated, dense policies and guidelines, and implement monitoring and enforcement mechanisms to ensure that we're compliant. So this is a very, very big deal here. And when we do this, we mitigate the risk that's posed by hackers and attackers, and safeguard sensitive systems and information against potentially catastrophic breaches, right? So that's kind of the whole idea. These are our learning objectives, and as a general prerequisite, we need principles of security, which I already did, and the video of that should already be up. So if you haven't seen that, you can go see that. But then there's an extra one, which is web application security, and this is one of those prerequisites that I never recorded because it's actually such a small room. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go through web application security real quick, and then from there we'll go continue from the why is it important portion of this. So let's go and check out web application security. Web application security is a free room inside of TryHackMe. So if you want to go and venture into TryHackMe and you don't want to necessarily pay for the the $7 membership or whatever it is, because there's a discount code in the description below that'll actually give you a discount, so it'll end up being like $7. So if you don't want to do that, this is actually one of the free rooms. And so The intro of this goes a little bit like this, right? So every one of us uses different programs on our computers. Generally speaking, programs run on our computers using computer processing power and storage. Moreover, to use it, we need to install it first. And if we can do anything, what if we can use any program without installing it, right? So to use a program, we typically have to install it. But what if you can do it without actually installing it? And so a web application is like a program, so a web application, right? That can be used without installation. And so if you're on a website, typically, if you wanted to really be kind of technical about it, the TryHackMe website is technically an application, technically. You can use it without installation, and you can do something like a modern web browser, such as Firefox, Safari, Chrome, all that stuff. So instead of installing everything that you need, you just need to browse the related pages. And these are some examples over here. Okay, so you can go through Gmail without actually having a web or an email client on your computer. Outlook has the desktop application as well as the web application. Microsoft 365, same thing. You can use an online version of it instead of downloading them on your desktop, on your actual machine. Google Drive, same thing. All of these things, right? So there are literally thousands of examples like this. And a very common one that we all use is online banking web applications. So you don't download anything on your machine, you actually use their web portal. So the program is running on a remote server. That's what it means. A server refers to a computer system running continuously all the time, 24/7, to serve the client's information or access or whatever. So in this case, a server will run a specific type of program that we can access through a web browser. We can look at online shopping as an example. The application will read data about the products and their details, and then we'll read that from a database server. And the database is used to store information in an organized manner, but it's basically a server. It just holds a bunch of different database points or items or products, right? This could be information about the products, information about customers, invoices, payments that have been made, payments that are pending. A database could be a lot of different sets of data, right? A database server is responsible for a lot of things: reading, searching, writing to the actual database. The online shopping web application might need more than one database to access. So for example, there's a product database, customer database, sales database, right? And we can see the amount of information stored in any online shopping system. And so if we manage to exploit that system and steal the customer database, then we can get a lot of stuff and typically cause a lot of damage to the client, the company itself, right? So this is kind of what that would look like. And so the person, the client, the user, the customer does a search for an item. It goes through the online web application, whatever that web portal looks like. The web portal goes through the product database, gets the search results, puts it back onto the web application, and then the person sees it on the results page, right? So they send a query out, and then from there you see something on the results page. Very, very simple process. Now, if you purchase anything, your information gets added to the customer database, and that includes your payment information, your credit card information, right? So that's very, very sensitive data, and it could cause a lot of damage to that company's reputation and lawsuits and all that stuff. So this is what it kind of would look like if you're trying to do it, right? So you look at everything on a website, on a Shopify account, for example, and you don't see all of the technical mumbo jumbo going in the background. You just see a nice portal with products, and you can search through them and so on and so forth. So it's very, very simple. It's very basic to understand, but it can be vulnerable, right? There can be risks and exploits and all those things. So many companies offer a bug bounty program. A bug bounty program means that if you can find a security vulnerability in their company systems, they'll pay you for that. And there are a lot of people who make really good money from this. And I'm actually considering doing it. I just need to get a little bit better at being able to do these types of things against web servers. I've gotten pretty good at penetration testing machines and computers and stuff like that, but I need to get really good at web server pen testing. And if you can do that, I mean, they pay a lot of money for that kind of stuff. So that's called a bug bounty program. You discover a bug, and then you can earn a few hundred USD to tens of thousands of dollars USD, depending on the severity of the vulnerability. And Microsoft has paid out a lot of stuff. So what do you need to access a web application? You need a web browser. So that is it for our intro to web application security. Now, web application security risks. So these are the processes that you go into when you access a website. You log in on the website. So for example, your Amazon account. You log in on your Amazon account, you search for a product, you add the product to your shopping cart, you specify your shipping address, and you provide payment details, and then click order. And so there are a few categories of common attacks against web applications. These are specific steps that can be used to embed your injection of whatever malicious code or anything that you want to do. So log in at the website. We can try to discover the password by trying a lot of different passwords, and then we would use a long list of passwords with an automated tool to test them against the login page. Search for the product. The attacker can attempt to breach the system by adding specific characters and codes to the search term. It's called SQL injection, and the attacker's objective is for the target system to return data that it should not return or execute a program that it should not execute. And you have provide payment details. The attacker would check if the payment details are sent in clear text or using weak encryption, and then you can decrypt it or, basically see clear text data and steal the information that way. So obviously we're not going to be able to cover everything, but there's something called the OWASP Top 10, which is for the Open Web Application Security Protocol, I believe. That is it's like the industry standard for vulnerabilities against web applications. And a lot of companies who run web applications grade their security stature, security posture against the OWASP Top 10 list. And this changes either annually or biannually, but it's an updating list. So identification and authentication failure is a big one. So what it does is allows the attacker to use brute force, basically try a password dictionary or a bunch of different passwords using an automated tool to find login credentials. And then if the user chooses a weak password is usually very easy to guess. And storing the user's password in plain text, which is another really big no-no. And if we manage to read that file containing all the passwords, then we can get all of their passwords. So you have the username and then the passwords attached to it. And it's really dangerous. So obviously, it seems super obvious, but there are companies that do this stuff. So broken access control. Failing to apply the principle of least privilege access control, right? So who has access to certain pages or certain objects inside the web server? And if the access control permissions are broken, if your policies for access control are broken, that means that you did not apply the principle of least privilege, and users have more permissions than they actually need. So an online customer should be able to view prices of the items, but they should not be able to change the prices of the items, because that way they could, put the price as $0 and then just get a bunch of stuff mailed to them. And then your system will do it because you're probably not tracking that kind of stuff, and it's all being done automatically. Being able to view or modify someone else's account by using the unique identifier of that account. That's a big no-no. You don't want a bank client to be able to view the transactions of another client. Being able to browse pages that require authentication, like logging in as an unauthenticated user, or being able to access pages that are only reserved to web admins, which is kind of the same version of this. So we can't let anyone view the webmail before actually logging in. An injection attack refers to a vulnerability in the web app where they can insert malicious code as a part of their input into a search field, right? Inside like a search bar, they can inject whatever in there. And because of that, the lack of proper validation and sanitation is the cause of that. And if they can do that, they can query the web server and get all of this information, for example, or the usernames and passwords, or payment card information, any of that stuff. And then there's cryptographic failures, which is essentially the way that you encrypt the data. Cryptography and ciphers is something that we talked about in our third episode of this particular path in the security engineer. And so we actually looked at a lot of different cryptographic algorithms and ciphers and all of that stuff. And a cryptographic failure means that you either didn't use cryptography or you used really weak cryptography, so it was decrypted. And they decrypted the whatever the encryption was, and they turned the ciphertext back into clear text, and now they can see everything. And that is a big no-no as well. So sending sensitive data in clear text, which means you didn't even bother to encrypt it, using HTTP instead of HTTPS, for example. HTTP is the protocol that uses to access the web server. HTTPS is the secure version of that, which encrypts all of the communication back and forth from the web server and you, the client, right? People can read everything that you send over HTTP, but not HTTPS. Weak cryptographic algorithm is another big failure. One old cryptographic algorithm is to shift each letter by one. So for example, TryHackMe becomes USZ yada 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 because they just shifted one to the right, I believe. So TURSYZ, right? And so that's a very weak cipher. It's a very weak algorithm, and it's easy to break. There was a website that we were using that it's called Quip, something like that. That was inside of the cryptography room, the cryptography video, episode 3, and you didn't even need anything. You just take the code right here, and then you paste it in there, and it decrypts it for you. And it's very easy, and it's instant, and it's terrifying how easy it is to decrypt weak encryptions. So using default or weak keys for cryptographic functions, same thing. So if you use a key this is the secret key. If that's your weak key, basically the password to decrypt something, if your key is weak, then it's really easy to get in. So very, very basic. This should not be sophisticated because we have already gone through the cryptography room. So this should be all review for you. If you haven't seen that video, go watch that video. It's a great video. I actually had a blast doing it because cryptography is amazing. It's like one of those things that I didn't know I loved doing, but yeah, cryptography, encryption, decryption, very, very cool stuff. So you discover that the login page allows an unlimited number of login attempts without trying to slow down the user or lock the account. What is the category of this risk? This is identification and authentication failure. So identifying and authenticating somebody, and this was actually above here. This is what is right here. When we were talking about brute forcing, that's what that means. So identification and authentication failure. You notice that the username and password are sent in clear text. That is a cryptographic failure. There was no encryption, and that is a big no-no. So there is a practical example that we can go through, and I mean, might as well. We'll just go through it real quick just to see how this plays out. All right, so there's a site that's attached to this, and basically we're going to investigate a vulnerable website that uses insecure direct object references. It's called EDOR, and it falls under the category of broken access control. And so we're going to essentially just read through the instructions and follow along and discover our path here. So it says, or our flag, excuse me. This inventory management system manages all the shipments related to tires. A competitor sent a group of malicious actors to sabotage our logistics. The attackers used the account of one of the employees and mixed up the planned shipments. If incorrect shipments are sent, the production will be delayed. So these are our orders that we're looking at right here. So this is our main page right here. We have planned shipments, inventory, and then our activity. So this is Roddy, warehouse supervisor, so on and so forth. So let's see what the instructions are over here. All right, so basically the instructions are, and this is typically what an EDOR vulnerability is. So if you can see the product ID, for example, if you can see this, and if I can change this to 53, then I can see product ID 53. That's an EDOR vulnerability. I shouldn't be able to see this inside the link and then be able to change it and then directly go to the product as well. Same thing with image. If I change it from 1003 to 1002 or 1004, I should not be able to do that inside the hyperlink of the website. And then a really, really big one is this thing. If my user ID is this and I change it to 17, then I'll probably see user ID 17 and all of their information, which is again a really big no-no. And same thing with TXT files or any other file. So if we go over here, if we click on inventory, for example, and then there's SKU0013, right? So if I do a / here, can I type here? I can't type here. So what about user ID 11? Can I change any of this stuff? Let's see what we can change. Yeah, we can change that. So can I change inventory? I can change inventory. Okay, so if I do SKU0015, then okay, that's fine. So that means that was not working. That's always a good thing. So SKU0015 didn't work. Let's say if we go to planned shipments, SKU0253, these are the shipments. The main page is like this. So let's see if we can change this to 0. Oh, employee ID 10. Yeah, that worked. So we can actually see employee Anton, warehouse supervisor. So let's go from the very beginning, see who we see. Ludger is the president. So the first employee, obviously, he would get the highest or the first name. Vice president is Daniela. We have Ormond. Ormond. User number 3. So here we go. 4, no user 4. Let's see. 5, no user 5. Is there a 6? Nope. Is there a 7? This Margaret in the front desk. 8 is the Willie database administrator. 9 is, ooh, look at her. She actually has a lot of information here. So SKU change. The SKU was changed right here. So let's see right here. So this is actually what we're trying to do. Check which user account was used to make malicious changes and revert them. After reverting the changes, what is the flag that you saw? So this is the person that made all these changes. So let's revert these things, and there is our flag. So that's an EDOR vulnerability, right? So you can change the information, and that's an EDOR explored is the flag that we're going to retrieve. You can change the information inside the web URL and then access different pages. That's what an EDOR vulnerability is, and that's an insecure web application. That should never happen, right? So that's basically it for our web application security, just so you can kind of understand a general outline of what a web application security is and how it follows, so that we can actually go ahead and move on to our governance and regulation the rest of this room. So we did what was required in our introduction, and I didn't want to create a whole separate video for that, because you just saw how quickly that was. That was like maybe not even 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, not even. So that's essentially it for our intro of governance and regulation. So let's actually go into why governance and regulation is important. It's kind of an obvious question, but let's get the answer. Why is it important? So we have some important terms here. We have governance, regulation, and compliance. Governance, think about it as govern. If you're governing something, you're managing and directing it to achieve the objectives and ensure compliance with laws, regulations, and standards. A regulation is the rule or the law that's been enforced, right? Compliance is the state of adhering to laws, regulations, and standards. So you're compliant, and compliance is the state of it, the act of it, right? And regulation is the actual rule or law itself, and governance is the overall management and direction to achieve compliance, right? So that's basic terminologies here. So when you're doing InfoSec governance, information security governance, you're looking at a few different things under that umbrella. So you have your strategy, you have the policies and procedures, risk management, performance measurement, and compliance, right? Given the escalating complexity of cyber threats, the significance of information security governance is growing. It's essential for risk management, safeguarding confidential data from unauthorized intrusion, and adhering to pertinent regulations. So strategy is developing and implementing a comprehensive information strategy, information security strategy, that aligns with the organization's overall business objective, right? If you are in the health industry, HIPAA is probably part of your strategy. If you collect payment information, PCI DSS is a part of your strategy, payment card information, right? Policies and procedures, preparing policies and procedures that govern the protection of information. Risk management, managing the risks, so conduct assessments, identify potential threats, and protect the information assets and risk mitigation measures against that. performance measurement. So metrics and key performance indicators, KPIs. KPIs are used a lot in marketing, but this is also in tech, and making sure that those key performance indicators measure the effectiveness of the information security governance program. And then, of course, be compliant and adhere to regulations, right? Information security regulation is a big deal. So we talked about payment card standard, payment card industry. That's for if you're collecting payment card payments. General data protection regulation is, as it says, it's a general data protection regulation. So this applies to pretty much every single website that is trying to do business legally and be compliant. PII and EDA, or PIPEDA, but this is I never have actually seen it be as a full thing. But PII is one of those things that every single corporation that has any person that is either a client or an employee has to adhere to PII. And then we have HIPAA, as we already mentioned, and we have Sarbanes-Oxley, that has to do with auditing, and then you have the BSA, which is the Bank Secrecy Act, and Gramm-Leach-Bliley, and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of different regulations. So when you go towards regulations, when you try to adhere to regulations, the rules are pretty much set out for you. So you don't really have to worry too much about it, because you just follow the rules and make sure that you adhere to those rules. So when you do that, the benefits are that you have a more robust security posture, and you comply with relevant regulations, and it can help the organization reduce risk of security breaches and protect sensitive information, because these things that have already been established have been tried and true. They're proven. They've been tested. So all you got to do is just follow along. And then if you want to one-up those things, be even more secure than what's been outlined. It's not that complicated. Increase stakeholder confidence. So if there's anybody investing in your company, or the CEOs or the C-suite executives of the company, they feel more confident about you. If you have investors, they feel much more confident about you, whether it's public investors or there's like private investors. And it's a big deal. So they're like, hey, you know what? These people are being compliant. We like this company. Regulatory compliance, compliance with GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, or any of these things, again, has a benefit, right? It's good for you. It's in your best interest to be compliant in those things. Better alignment with business objectives. Security governance frameworks can help organizations align their InfoSec strategies with their overall business objectives and ensure that security measures are cost effective and contribute to the organization's success. Informed decision making. If you're compliant and you know what rules you're supposed to follow, you can make decisions easier. Believe it or not, it makes decision making way easier because you have all of the information. You're not guessing. And it's, again, it's a benefit. It's a big benefit. And then, of course, there's a competitive advantage. If you're doing it and your competition isn't doing it, you become a more attractive choice in the eyes of investors and consumer public, business, commercial dealings, all of that stuff. So these are just some of the relevant laws and regulations. This is not even remotely close to anything that can be applicable. And depending on what industry you're in, what company you're going to be working for, I would just do a Google of what rules and regulations does this industry have to follow. And then if you want to do even more fine-tuned, you would do what cybersecurity rules and regulations, what information security rules and regulations does the banking industry have to follow, for example. So GDPR is the regulation propagated by European Union that sets strict requirements for how organizations handle and protect and secure personal data of EU citizens and residents. But this applies to the United States as well. This is not just Europe. Health insurance portability and accountability has everything to do with healthcare and protecting health-related information of their citizens. For example, their treatment plans, their actual information that has to do with their social security numbers, all of that stuff, the medications they're on, the surgeries that they've done, all of that stuff. PCI, payment card processing, financial regulation obviously has everything to do with payment card information. So, I mean, that one's kind of a gimme. It's very easy to understand. And then Gramm-Leach-Bliley, as we mentioned earlier, has to do with financial companies, so banks. They have to be sensitive to customer non-public information, including implementing information security programs, privacy notices, disclosing information, sharing practices, so on and so forth. So this was a lawsuit. Gramm-Leach-Bliley was a lawsuit that happened God knows when, And as a result of that, there was an act that came out to govern the way that financial companies distribute data and share data about their clients and about their investors, so on and so forth. So the term used for legal and regulatory frameworks that govern the use of protection of information assets is called regulation. And the health insurance portability, HIPAA, basically targets the healthcare industry. So health insurance, healthcare. So that's why it's important. Now let's go into some information security frameworks. InfoSec frameworks provide comprehensive sets of documents that outline the organization's approach to InfoSec and govern how security is implemented, managed, enforced, so on and so forth. This includes policies, standards, guidelines, procedures, and baselines. These sound similar, but there's nuanced differences. So a policy is a formal statement that outlines an organization's goals, principles, and guidelines. Standards is a document establishing specific requirements or specifications for a particular process, product, or service. Guidelines is the recommendations and best practices. They're not mandatory, but a lot of places do consider them, it's like an unwritten rule that if you don't follow certain guidelines, they're not going to look at you as a good investment as far as the assets to the company. Procedures, it's a specific steps, policies and procedures come hand in hand. These two they're usually included inside the same document. You'll hear policies and procedures be embedded inside of the same document typically. And then you have baselines. So the minimum security standards or requirements that an organization must meet. It's a baseline. It is the minimum, absolute bare minimum that you got to do. So when you develop governance documents, these are some general steps. So you want to identify the scope and purpose of the document. What is it going to cover? Why is it needed? A password policy might be required to ensure robust and secure passwords. A baseline might be to establish a minimum number of security, a minimum level of security for all of the systems. Research and review. So you have the scope and the purpose. Now you're going to research and review. Research relevant laws like regulations, industry standards, best practices to ensure that the document is comprehensive. Review existing policy procedures and other documents to avoid duplicating efforts for contradicting. Draft the actual document, so basically create a draft of it and then review it again, get feedback from the supervisory board, your executive board, and get approval. If they don't approve, they're going to mention changes that they want you to make, and then you go and you redraft, and then you come back and you review again, and finally when it gets approved, you go and you implement and communicate it across the entire company and start training the employees and make sure that key people know what they're supposed to be doing. And a part of this is also the permissions, right? The broken user controls or broken access controls is what we talked about in the last couple of tasks. Is that when you implement it, a part of that is proper access controls. When you communicate it, that means everybody gets trained. It's a part of the administrative processes inside of the company. And then you review and update. As changes happen in the industry, it's your job to be aware of those changes, and you will review them systematically every 3 months, every 6 months, every year. You got to review these things. Whether or not changes have happened, you got to review these things systematically. And then if there's an update that needs to be made, you update it, and then you go back here again. And you literally actually start from the very kind of top right here. So if you need to do an update, you identify the scope, research and review, draft a document, review and approve, implement and communicate, and then again, review and update. So that's kind of the process for governance and governance documents. And then we have explanation through real world scenarios. So preparing a password policy here. So the password requirements, right? Minimum length, complexity, and expiration. So you'll see that a lot. You'll be, when you create a new account, they'll be like, you need to have at least, 8 characters, 1 special character, 1 number, right? Or sometimes they'll say at least 1 capital letter, saying things like that. These are all password requirements, minimum password requirements. And then the password usage guidelines. So how passwords should be used, such as requiring unique passwords for each account, maybe. That's a big deal. Prohibiting the sharing of passwords. I mean, this should be pretty freaking basic, pretty standard, but there were some companies that I worked for where the management had shared their passwords with the lower level employees because they wanted to make it more convenient. And then the lower level employees would make decisions using the manager's password, and then the manager got caught a couple of times by upper management, and they're like, did you do this? And no, I didn't do this. Then your password was used, and they're like, oh shit. So yeah, it seems common sense, but big companies still do that stuff. Define password storage and transmission guidelines, encryption for password storage and requiring secure connections for transmission. Define password change and reset guidelines. How often do we need to change that? Communicate the policy, pretty straightforward, and monitor compliance. So you got to do regular auditing of these things to make sure that people are actually being compliant. And then you have your incident response procedure. So what are the incident types that could actually affect you? Some places don't deal with the incidents that affect certain businesses are unique, right? It doesn't apply to every single business. So for example, if you never handle cash, if you never actually deal with cash, you don't need cash handling incident response procedures because nobody's going to come and rob you for the cash that you don't have. But if you do have cash, then you need to have incident response scenarios and procedures. This is what happens if you get robbed for cash. And your life is more important. We're insured. You don't need to do these types of things. Make sure that if they want something, give it to them. Whatever, right? Incident response roles and responsibilities. So who are the stakeholders? They're incident response team members, IT personnel, legal and compliance, marketing, senior management, all those people. Detailed steps. Do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this. Don't do this, and don't do this, and don't do that. Detailed steps, detailed actions that they take, and then rehearse all of that stuff so that they know what the hell's going on. And then report the incident to management and document the incident response procedure for future reference. This is immediately. Don't think about it. When it happens, report it immediately, unless you are the management. And even if you are the management, you need to report it immediately. Don't think about it, report it, and then come back and try to review and debrief and see what happened. Communicate the incident response procedures. That one's easy. And review, update all the time. Organizations only sometimes need to make a standard framework or baseline. Instead, they follow and use already made documents related to their field because all these things have already been done for us. And there are numerous factors upon which which standard frameworks or baseline checklists should be used. These include regulatory environments, so on and so forth. So the steps that involve periodic evaluation of policies and making changes is called the review and update step. And a set of specific steps for undertaking a particular task is called a procedure. Specific steps is procedure, right? So that is InfoSec framework. So let's talk about GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. All right. So the governance component, risk management component, and compliance component. These are we can call it the triad or the trifecta. There's another word that I'm looking for, but it'll come to me. But this is basically what they all go hand in hand, right? So the governance component of an InfoSec framework it involves guiding an organization by setting direction through information security strategy, which includes policy, standards, baselines, frameworks, etc. Everything that we just talked about, along with establishing appropriate monitoring methods to measure and ensure the performance and assess the outcomes. So this is governance. This is when you govern something. This is that component. It involves guiding an organization by setting the direction through InfoSec strategy, which includes everything that we just talked about, along with proper monitoring methods. Then you have risk management. So identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risks to the organization, and then implementing controls and mitigation strategies in advance. This is not something that you do after the incident happens. This is something that you do before it happens, and you rehearse and you train, and monitoring and reporting is a part of the process. And you continuously evaluate and refine. It's continuous. It's not a one-time thing, okay? This is a big deal. And then you have compliance. So just be compliant, right? Make sure that you're meeting legal, regulatory, and industry obligations, that activities that aligns with the activities, right? With the policies and the procedures. See, you see how it comes in the same phrase right here, policies and procedures. It includes developing and implementing compliance programs, conducting regular audits and assessments, and reporting on compliance issues to stakeholders. So, how to develop the GRC program, which is generic guidelines for governance, regulation, risk and compliance. So, it's just a lot of checklists here, right? So if you want to read the details, you're more than welcome to read the details. I'm just going to stop right here so you can read the details, but I'm just going to go through the headlines here. So define the scope and your objectives, then conduct a risk assessment, then develop the policies and procedures, establish a governance process, how you're going to govern your policies and procedures, and implement those things. Implement controls. There's technical controls, non-technical controls, and those can be managerial controls, administrative controls. Technical controls could be logical controls. It could be a lot of different, this is an all-encompassing word. So everything that you can think about when it comes down to technical, it could be actual machinery and IT stuff, or it could be the specific steps into the way that something works. It could be logic. So technical could be all-encompassing. Non-technical is also all-encompassing. And the controls for those things could be like an IPS or a SIM, right? So that's a part of technical controls. Non-technical controls is security training, having security walking up and down the premises. That's all controls for governance, policies, procedures, risk, and all of that. Then you monitor and measure performance, and then you keep monitoring, keep measuring, continuously improve, because you're constantly monitoring, measuring. This is a cyclical process. This is not a one-time thing that happens. And when you add something to your scope, which is everything that covers the regulation environment, so it could be all of your employees, all of your locations, all of your devices, your network objects, all of that stuff falls under scope. And then there's objectives. All of that falls under your definition of what are we trying to do here. And then once you actually have all of the objects and assets and all that stuff, you conduct a risk assessment. What is at risk? What's vulnerable? Then you develop policies and procedures to protect those things. And if something happens, what do you do in that event? Establish governance processes. So make sure that it's actually being governed, that people are checking these things. There is some kind of a managerial team or a committee, right? A security steering committee that meets regularly to review the risks and govern, like a government, they govern. And then implement your controls, whatever they are. It could be a firewall, right? It has to do, it's anything. It's security guards, cameras, whatever that is. Those are all controls. And then monitor and measure performance. Keep monitoring, keep measuring. And if anything changes, you improve. If anything changes, you go back to the beginning of the process, define the scope and objectives, and go through the process again. Even if nothing changes, the industry changes, the world changes, hackers get smarter, and you need to be doing regular reviews, continuous reviews. So in the financial sector, this is kind of what it looks like. You have the governance related activities. So nominate the governance level executives, make financial related policies such as the Bank Secrecy Act we already talked about, anti-money laundering, financial audits, financial reporting, crisis management, and a lot of different stuff. You have risk management activities. So what are the potential risks? What are the possible outcomes? What can we do to combat those things? So financial fraud risk, fraudulent transactions through cyber attacks, stolen credentials through phishing, all that. Compliance activities, take measures to meet legal requirements and industry standards such as PCI, all that stuff. We already talked about all that stuff. So what is the component of the GRC framework involved in identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risk? And that is risk management. Is it important to monitor and measure the performance? Yeah, it is. So let's move to privacy and data protection. So, privacy and data protection. I mean, do I need to say more? Protect data and respect privacy. So the General Data Protection Regulation, the European guideline that we talked about earlier, that regulation was implemented in May of 2018 to protect personal data. And that's any data associated with an individual that can be utilized to identify them, or either directly or indirectly. So it could be their address, it could be their ID number, it could be their social security number, it could be their name, last name, birthday, all that stuff, right? So Key points of the law include this. Prior approval must be obtained before collecting any data, so let them know you're about to collect data. It should be kept to a minimum and only collected when necessary. So if you don't need their social security number, don't ask for their social security number. If it's not necessary and you collect it, you're putting your organization at risk. So if you don't need it, don't ask for it. It's very basic. Adequate measures that are to be adopted to protect the data, and that's a really, really big deal. So this is what GDPR looks like at a glance. So all of this is a part of this one little policy, and all of these things need to be present. It would be nice if you had them. It's mandatory if you're going to be compliant to GDPR. And GDPR is literally standard across every business that collects information. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you collect information, you have to adhere to GDPR. That's why they chose this as the regulation that we're going to review. So the law applies to all businesses that could conduct business in the European Union and collect store processes. And again, it applies to the United States as well, because I think we're probably part of the European Union maybe, or something like that. But it's one of the most stringent data privacy regulations worldwide and safeguards personal data during collection. Companies can only collect personal data for legitimate reasons, yada, yada, yada. So tier 1 would be more severe violations, including unintended collection, sharing data with third parties without consent, maximum penalty now amounting to 4% of their revenue, or 20 million euros, whichever is higher. So if you don't make 20 million as your 4%, they're going to tax you or fine you 20 million. But if your 4% is 200 million, they're going to take 200 million. Okay? Tier 2 is less severe. So cyber policies, breach notifications, it's 2% of their revenue, or 10 million euros, whichever is higher. So it's pretty big. It's a very big regulation. And so you have payment card industry standard, payment card industry data security standard, PCI DSS, credit card information, debit card information, anything that has to do with payment cards. And that is by these brands right here. Strict control access to cardholder information and monitoring unauthorized access using recommended measures such as web application firewalls and encryption, so on and so forth. It's a big one. If any company collects payment card information, they need to adhere to this, and it's not a would be nice, it's mandatory. So what is the maximum fine for tier 1 users as GDPR? And that's 4%. PCI DSS, CHD is cardholder data. And just like that, we looked at data protection and privacy. So let's look at NIST special publications. NIST 853 is called Security and Privacy Controls for Information Systems and Organizations. And this is one of the standard ones. So if you're if you use information systems at all, or if you use information in your organization at all, this applies to you, right? By the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and provides a catalog of security controls to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data or systems. The publication serves as a framework for organizations to assess and enhance the security and privacy of their information systems and comply with various laws, regulations, and policies. It incorporates best practices from multiple sources, including industry standards, guidelines, international frameworks, etc. NIST 853 has all of these points. Look at how wonderful these are. And so remember, we talked about technical controls earlier. You have access control, identification, authentication, system communication, system information, system services acquisition, system services development, program. That's all under technical control. You have physical controls, personnel security, which is bodyguards, security guards, physical environmental protection, which could be fences and cameras and stuff like that. Media protection, protect your media. That could be anything from storing your drives somewhere or anything like that. You have strategic controls, and then you have administrative controls, which is the longest one. So audits, awareness training, configuration management, contingency planning, incident response, maintenance, program management, risk assessment, all of this stuff. This all falls under NIST 853. So that's all under this one little rule. because if you're dealing with information at any capacity, you need to be aware of this and adhere to these rules. So, developing and implementing NIST 853 based information security program, and these are your controls. So read through this if you want, which I mean you should, because if you are studying for this examination, you need to read through this. I would recommend you even look all of these things up and try to figure out what all of the details of this are. Basically, go look this thing up. Go look the NIST 853 up and see what this is right here. This is a big old publication, and it's by nist.gov. So this is not a small document. It's a 500-page document covering one little regulation. So this is an important thing for you to look into if you're going to go into InfoSec. And then you have your best practices. So discovery and classification right here. So discover and classify sensitive data. Map out the data and permissions and make sure what you're supposed to protect, how you're supposed to protect them, who's supposed to have access. Access control, so manage, lock it up. If people don't need access, don't give it to them. Keep it the lowest level of privilege as possible for anybody. And monitor, that's pretty all-encompassing, very self-explanatory. So the monitor data, monitor the activity of the data, monitor user behavior, who's accessing what, why are they looking at these documents, why are they going into this folder, why would they even go into the etc shadow folder, why the hell do you need to see everybody's passwords? That's like a very important, it's like even if they're trying to access it, it's like, why are you trying to access this thing? What's your purpose for that? So then there's 863B. It's a set of guidelines created to help organizations establish effective digital identity practices. So and authentication and verifying the identities of individuals who access digital devices, systems, services, networks, provide recommendations for different levels of identity assurance, ranging from basic to high assurance. They also offer advice on using authentication factors, including passwords, biometrics, tokens, securely managing and storing credentials, so on and so forth. So, per NIST, which control category does media protection lie? So if we go up here and we try to look for media protection, which is right here, it's under physical controls. And 853, which control category does incident response lie? And I already know that, it's under administrative. And which phase or name of 853 compliance best practices results in correlating identified assets and permissions? And so right here, we have map, which is data and permissions. And then if we go over here, identify assets and permissions, is that right here? Well, there's nothing called mapping over there. So it would probably be, I think I actually even had to open the document, the compliance best practices result right here. This is just the overview right here, but there's a specific section of this inside of that giant PDF document that we opened up, that 500-page document that goes in further details for the compliance best practices. All right, so let us now move on to information security management and compliance. So this is one of the standards, again, in InfoSec management and compliance. It's the ISO IEC 27001, and then there's 27002, which is, it kind of goes hand in hand with this. It's a requirement to plan, develop, run, and update the organization's InfoSec management system, ISMS. The official 27001 documents are paid for and can be purchased from this link, and it was developed by International Organization for Standardization and the International Electrotechnical Commission. And so this is it right here, and you can get this for free, technically. Or never mind. What am I saying? It's not for free. This is something that can be purchased for, convert Swiss francs into your currency. So 129 Swiss francs is how you can get this thing for. But I have a feeling you can probably get this by Googling and trying to find the information, being pretty clever with your research and savviness and stuff like that. But 129 Swiss francs can can buy that for you. This is what it covers. These are the core components. So the scope, which is the boundaries, right, including the assets and processes that you got to cover, information security policy, risk assessment, risk treatment, statement of applicability, internal audit, and management review. All of these things are just the general guidelines of this, the core components. If you want to read through the explanations, feel free to pause the video. But this is all part of the ISO IEC 27001. And this is what that looks like at a glance, right? So it starts, and this is in no particular order, right? This is just all encompassing, all inclusive. And maybe if I can zoom out a little bit, maybe I can kind of make it a little bit easier for you to see the whole thing. So there's that. There's the whole thing right here. Then we can go a little bit further down. And so an ISMS, Information Security Management System, built on the 27001 standard requires careful design and execution. It entails exhaustively evaluating the organization's security procedures, detecting gaps, and conducting a thorough risk assessment. Regular monitoring and measurement and continuing development are crucial. Leadership support and resource allocation are essential. These are, again, commonsensical, but common sense is not so common these days. We have Service Organization Control 2, so SOC 2, not to be confused with Security Operations Center. Service Organization Control 2 was developed by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. What? Of all people. Compliance auditing framework. It focuses on assessing the efficacy of a company's data security based on the CIA triad. SOC 2 can reassure customers, stakeholders, and business partners that the company has put sufficient controls in place to safeguard systems data and sensitive information. It's essential for service providers interacting with client data or offering solutions that process, store, transmit sensitive data. So, important cardinals. SOC 2 is an auditing standard that evaluates the usefulness of a service organization's controls related to confidentiality, availability, integrity, and privacy. Independent auditors conduct SOC 2 audits. SOC 2 reports provide valuable information to customers, stakeholders, and regulators on a service organization's security and privacy practices. So if they conduct service type business, so that could be law firms, it could be financial organizations, it could be, massage parlors probably, like anybody that offers a service probably has to adhere to this as far as information security is concerned. And the audit report will assess the controls in place at the cloud computing company and include any findings or recommendations for improvement. And it can be shared with customers and other stakeholders to ensure the company takes appropriate measures, right? So accountability, it's a big deal here. What information security protection SOC 2 provides? So you have third-party service providers store, process sensitive information securely. That's the general accountability. And you determine the scope, very similar to the ISO 27001. You choose a suitable auditor, typically a third party. Look at their reputation, experience, and availability, obviously. Plan the audit, prepare for the audit. That could be by training people, by getting rid of things that shouldn't be publicized, by locking up information that should be locked up. Prepare for the audit, get audited, and then get your audit report. This was something that we had to do regularly when I was in banking. Also, when I was in telecommunications, there were annual audits. Sometimes there were biannual audits, or not biannual, semi-annual, like every 6 months. Sometimes there were quarterly audits, depending on how well you did or how poorly you did in your last audit. So audits they're a terrifying word for a lot of people, especially if you're unorganized. But if you're organized, audits, you'll ace them, and it's like you're basically getting graded on your organization and you're following of rules. So I know some people that you really loved audit season because they just wanted to get that pat on the back, that gold star that they did great. So which component of ISO IEC 27001 involves selecting and implementing controls to reduce the risks, and that is the risk treatment. And then in SOC 2 generic controls, which control allows that the system remains available? And that would be availability. So just like that, we looked at two, okay? Two information security management and compliance rules. So now let's go into the conclusion of our room here. All right, so we went through an overview and we got a little task to do here. So let's zoom out. Can I zoom out? There we go. We have all of the things that we just reviewed right here. So that's all of that is, but this is the instructions for what we're actually doing here. So this is called the vulnerability buster. And it looks like, oh my god, I love this game. I used to play this game at the arcade all the freaking time, the bubble buster thingy. So I'm going to skip the tour because I feel like I'm already ready. And so what are we doing first? Let's see. Please select the control framework and aim it at the corresponding bubble. Please hover over the vulnerability to see the problem that it represents. So we're going to go to, do I get to choose one of these? I do get to choose one of these, don't I? Okay, cool. So phishing emails goes to, it would be user awareness. I'm gonna go fire this mofo. Which of the following is a valid NIST publication dealing with security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations? So it's not NIST 27001, and this is actually 270,001. So it's definitely not that. I don't think it's COVID because we didn't even talk about that. So I'm going to go with 853. And so let's go and unpatched software, unregulated, non-compliant, man-in-the-middle attack. And we have general data protection, regulation, automatic patch management, SOC 2. So can I just attack any of these things? I wonder. So secure connection is probably the man in the middle. So, okay, so GDPR, that worked. Data leakage for the EU, that's what that is. So we're going to look at automatic patch management. Because this is right here. I don't know if it'll bounce off the wall or anything. Patch management, unpatched software. That's basically it. Which of the following frameworks primarily assists in InfoSec management and compliance? And so InfoSec 1, we didn't talk about. GDPR has to do with the EU. We'll do SOC 2, that has to do it. GDPR applies to the EU, voila, and SOC 2 applies to unregulated and non-compliant. Oh, come on, bruh. I was reading the stupid questions. I'm trying to be all good and explanatory, and the freaking thing didn't work. So there you go. This is NIST. Secure connection is going to be man in the middle. GDPR is the next one. Patch management is going to be this one, and that was it was SOC 2. And we have GDPR is going to go to the EU, and SOC 2 is going to go to there. And there we go. Just like that, we got our flag. Easy does it. So there it is. That was the conclusion. And we wrapped our governance and regulation room. As per usual, if you got any value from this, or if you're studying for your security engineer, you're a cybersecurity analyst, Pentest Plus, ethical hacker, any of those certifications, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. All we talk about on this channel are those topics, and we are currently on the security engineer path. If you're studying for your SOC level 1 or cybersecurity analyst, you will find a couple of really dope playlists on this channel that are all about that, and these things directly apply to those examinations. I have taken my CYSA exam, and I can tell you from experience that the content from TryHackMe actually does help, and it's very useful. The reason why I'm doing these videos is because some people don't do well with reading, and they like going along with a video format, audio format. So this is meant to help those people. But the information is good, and you use this information in your cert exams, and you also use them in your day-to-days as a security engineer or an analyst or a pen tester. So I think you'll actually get a lot of value from this channel, and I'm not saying that just to toot my own horn. I'm just getting responses from the community, and that's what I'm hearing. So I believe it'll be useful for you, And if nothing else, it would just be really awesome to have you as a part of our community so that we can just learn together and go down this path together and become security engineers and ethical hackers together. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker slash protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I'll see you in the next video. Later.